and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in work and in life and simplify them. And friends, we are doing a little series this season, specifically honing in on leadership and culture strategy simplified. And one of the elements of that, which I think is a very big topic to talk about, but we're going to break it down and simplify it in super practical ways for you, is how to lead culture change as an executive. When you're at the very, very top of your organization, there's high stakes involved. And how do you make the right decisions, the right allocations of budgets and priorities to actually do positive cultural transformation with your company? My special guest today is Dr. Alise Cortez, and she's the Chief Ignition Officer at Gusto Now, which is a human and organizational transformation consultancy that specializes in unleashing business results by igniting and growing high-performance teams who are passionate about delivering on the organizational mission. Resulting rewards, well, there's higher engagement, better performance, innovation, retention, customer delight. And in the end, when you have those things, you have profitability. Dr. Alise is also an organizational psychologist and logotherapist. She's an inspirational speaker, researcher, author of many really great books, which we're going to talk about, and the host of Working on Purpose. I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Dr. Alise Cortez. Hello, Alise. How are you?
Mary, you are a delight. I'm happy to be here. That's how I am.
I am so thrilled you're here. And I love to geek out about these kinds of conversations because I find sometimes things get glossed over. When you hear about people talking about what makes for a great company culture, some people are very quick to say, oh, it's the pizza parties, it's the ping pong table, right? It's could be a very tiny piece of that, but it's so much more, right? Like what makes or breaks cultural transformation, like positive cultural transformation at the executive level? What's your take on that?
Oh, there's a lot we could talk about for that, but as you know, but I want to start with the fact that so much of culture is unseen, unwritten, and just lived. And that means it literally lives in the molecules of the air that's hanging around you. And so the first thing that I would say is you really do need an outside perspective on what's going on. You on the inside really can't differentiate and discern that. So the first thing is to really get an outside eye on that. And by that, Mary, what I mean is, and this is something I've gotten to do over the years many times, it's an incredibly rewarding thing to get to experience with an organization, is if we're going to do a cultural change, the first thing we have to do is assess how is the culture today? What is happening today in the culture? And so we hold that up. And the second part of that, of course, is what do we want to change to? We can't just simply say we want to be more innovative. Well, we don't know how if we're not innovative today, what's stopping that? So that's the first thing. So the first thing is get an outside perspective, assess what's currently going on in the culture. What's so about the culture today? How do we describe what's going on, what we value, our behaviors, the way we communicate, and what do we want to change to?
Let's pause on the outside perspective, because I think that's a really important piece of it. I have heard anecdotally, and I have seen in my own career, as you progress higher and higher in the org chart, you get the higher and higher job titles, less and less people are honest with you. They actually give you the true, honest perspective of what's happening, boots on the ground. I'm not saying people are lying to you as a senior leader, but I think sometimes internal people are, glossing things over, making it doesn't sound not as bad, because they don't want to ruffle feathers and they don't want to, be the sticky widget. Like, do you notice that as well? Like with as being an outside consultant, you have such a ability to cut through the faff and tell it like it is, right?
Yeah, you're spot on right about this, Mary. It's definitely true. The higher up you get, the less truth that you get. And it's a terrible inverse relationship, but it's true. And I think there's another insidious aspect of what contributes to that, and that is that because culture becomes it's the normative way of being, you adjust to however things get done. You get used to, oh, we do things last minute around here. This is just how we do it. You don't notice that you're being rushed. It just becomes part of the air that you breathe, the water that you drink at the water fountain. So yes, in fact, I've just had so many amazing recent conversations with people that I've been working with about this notion of them wanting to give feedback to their senior leader, but afraid to do so, afraid of the ramifications, afraid they'll take it wrong, afraid that they won't give them other assignments in the future. So there's just, unfortunately, the higher you rise in the organization, the more scary you are, right? Very intimidating. And I know that from, if you get up to the CEO level, now you're really scary.
Yeah. And there's a sense of psychological safety. That's a very big buzzword in people and culture work right now. But that basically means, do you feel safe to ask the hard questions and say the hard things? Obviously, I'm saying these things with poise and professionalism. You're not going to just come out guns a-blazing. But if say, you give hard feedback upwards to senior executives and leaders, there's a fear that you're going to be on the chopping block for that, or you're a challenger, somebody who, isn't beating the drum, and that can be scary. Whereas I think an outside consultant, an advisor who's trusted, comes with actual data and insights, can be a very powerful advocate and advisor for that senior leadership team to really show them their blind spots, right?
Oh, I can share with you just quickly a little snippet on that. Just earlier this year, I was brought into an organization that knew that they had troubles because of their engagement survey results between their top tier executive leadership and their next leadership level down. There was a lack of trust. So I was brought in to help them understand what was going on there, and then to broker a retreat conversation around it to start the path toward healing and coming together again. And so one of the things that I always like to do whenever I'm doing anything related to culture or these kinds of matters is have one-on-one conversations whenever I can. If it's a small enough team, if I have to do surveys, then we can do that as well. But I like the idea of having a one-on-one conversation about what's going on, what's behind that. We're going to be talking about trust. What do you believe is contributing to a distrust problem here? What do you think that could help it, kind of thing? And then I looked at, of course, the engagement surveys. I could see some of the comments. And what became readily apparent to me in those conversations, Mary, was from the very top down, the president of the organization, it's a very punitive communication structure. And so people were saying things like, well, I'll get in trouble if I do this. Mother, may I have to ask go through so many channels of approval to get anything done. It was very much a parent-child sort of structure. And it was so easy for me to see it from the outside. So, of course, I wrote this as part of what we would be covering when we got together in the retreat. And I started to share some of the results and the patterns that I had heard people speaking about and how they were saying things. And there was a lot of sort of like, yeah, that does sound like us. And then one of the women who was in more of the middle tier leadership spoke up, and she said, she was commenting on something else. And she said, well, I knew I was going to get in trouble if I did this. And I stopped her. I said, did you hear what you just said? She said, what? I said, you said, I knew I was going to get in trouble if I did this. She said, I didn't even know I was saying that. That is what we're talking about here. It becomes so much the water that you drink that you can't separate it. It's in your speech. It's baked into your behavior, and that's what makes it so hard to change.
Right. And so I was just going to say is it's baked into the culture, and you just assume that all companies operate like this. And so when you exit from a company like that, you go, oh, it isn't like that everywhere. It's so eye-opening, I think, for a lot of people. So, obviously companies big and small, you have your office space, you have your core values written up on the walls in your office. And I've seen some organizations where people just roll their eyes. They're like, oh my God, this is not us. This is not actually what we do. This is not what we deliver. What would you say to leaders to actually make their values visible through their daily actions? How can they do that in real tangible ways?
This is so yummy. Okay. I love these kinds of chewy conversations. Well, a couple of things. First, I'll say in the work that I get to do with organizations, helping them to detect and articulate their purpose, mission, visions, and values. The first thing is, if you ask anybody in the organization, what are those things? And they do something like this. Just a second. I know there's a plaque here somewhere that says that. Oh, here it is. And they read it off. You've got a problem, right? It's got to be able to come from them lived. And so what I really love, and this is something that I do in my consultancy too now, thanks to meeting Dr. Carlos Jorge, who I had on my podcast some time ago. One is that you really need to understand how these things are lived in the organization. And I'm going to share it because it's his work and I use it in my consultancy now. He's really got a practice where, when you can understand the lived experience of purpose and of course the values in an organization. And he has just simply 3 questions that you can ask, like on maybe it's a quarterly basis from your whole entire employee base. And that will speak to surfacing both the values and the purpose. I generally use it for the purpose, but we use it for values too. Yeah. So the first question is, management's behavior is consistent with the purpose or mission of the company. Mm-hmm. Now, what that question does when they say, now on a scale of say 1 to 5 or whatever it is, what that speaks to is the head part or the coherence aspect of how is this organization living its purpose or its values? How do we see that? From the leadership perspective of how they're cohering day-to-day activities with that purpose or values. The second question that you can ask is, the purpose mission of my company is aligned with my personal values. Now think about that for just a second, why that's so profound. They're not going to read anything on a plaque if that's connected to them. So that particular question gets to the authenticity of how either the purpose or the values are lived in the organization, and that speaks to the heart. And the third final question you can ask your team, your full company is, my colleagues' behavior is consistent with the purpose or mission of this company. And that question gets to integrity, and really that speaks to hands. So the first question is about head, then the second one is about heart, the third one is about hands. Very, very simple way to understand, where do we have an issue? Is it how leadership is speaking and conducting themselves? Is it how your people feel connected to that purpose or those values? Or is it how you see everybody else doing things that aren't connecting to that? Very simple, very powerful.
I really love how you've broken it down in those 3 different ways. And, sometimes awareness is the first step. Asking the questions, measuring the data that comes back, looking at what the response rate is as well, because I think there's a lot to be told if you don't have a high response rate when you ask those questions, because it could mean disengagement from employees. They're like, well, I'm not even going to bother answering the survey because they don't do X, Y, and Z. But I think about it from what you said there, and like translating it to leaders. If this is something that is definitely apparent, based on the data scores that you're getting back, then it sounds like it's time to audit those core values or guiding principles of the company and go, okay, well, what's real and true now, and what's future state? What do we actually want to get to? I worked with a client once where their core values were extensive. I mean, there was so much to them. There's
25
no way
of them, yes.
Anyone could ever memorize this, much less actually action on them. So, helping them through the process of condensing it down, really getting to the core of the 3 things that are most important, helped it to be memorable and sticky, and actually created that change so that you could say, well, you know what, am I doing this today? And that translates in your daily actions, right?
Absolutely. And even then, like going back to that previous example about the trust issues, it was all over the place writ large as what the disconnects were, that we are not walking our talk, that the leaders are micromanaging us. We don't have a say in how things get done here. So that brings up the lack of autonomy that is so motivating for people otherwise when it's present. But even with all of that stuff writ large, and even though you know the difference between, okay, here's how I know we're behaving today, it's punitive or whatever, and we want to get to a place where we're collaborative and there's a sense of empowerment. Even though we say that we know what those two things are, the pull to go back to the way you have been living is very, very strong. It takes a lot, and it certainly takes a tremendous commitment from the executive level to embrace where we're trying to get to, and to ask for ongoing, and invite the whole team to say, please also hold me accountable in this. Show me when I'm not empowering you. Show me when you do feel empowered, because I'm in this too. And I think that's one of the biggest things that can really help a change initiative, a cultural change initiative, Mary, is if the executives recognize that we're part of the stew that caused the issue that we want to get away from. And I need your help too, to hold myself to the standard of where we want to get to for that change. And that takes vulnerability, it takes courage, it takes strong leadership, it takes commitment to where you're trying to grow to.
Yes, yes, and yes. I'd also add on to that, if you are an executive team that is looking to make positive cultural transformation, and you're like, yes, we're ready, and you go through the process of doing this incredible employee listening sessions, whether it's focus groups or surveys or otherwise, can I just please point out the obvious, but sometimes gets missed by so many organizations, is that you need to, before you do employee listening, allocate budget, resource, and headcount to action on the feedback you get. Because I see so many times where companies will survey and they get terrible results back, terrible information. Things are crumbling here, sending up a white flag, please help. But there's no budget, headcount, or allocation that's been earmarked for positive change. So what you've done is actually made it worse. You've collected the information. People have, been brave and given you feedback back, and you did nothing. Right? Oof,
it happens over and over again. And I would add one other piece in there that's important to what you just surfaced so brilliantly. The other thing that's really, really critical, whenever you're going to, you're surveying employees, or you're doing interviews or whatever on any sort of aspect, you need to share that overall high-level feedback back to the employees and say, this is what we heard you say. If you don't do that part of it too, it looks like they need to recognize, yeah, I did say that, or we did say that. If they don't feel like that you even heard the data, or you're being selective about what you've listened to, you've already missed the opportunity to really get their trust and their buy-in. So I want to situate that in there first. And then you're right. Secondly, I see so many organizations that collect that information. Now they know it, but they really don't do anything about it. And you're right, it makes it completely worse. Now you've actually reduced even more the trust, the engagement, the desire to be part of the organization, to give their all. It really is disastrous. And yet, I will tell you, I've seen so many really incredible leaders that have, really faced this kind of feedback. It's like getting really sharp, critical feedback smacked to your face. It's hard. It takes tremendous courage and heart to be able to respond to that and say, here's what I heard you say. And wow, we've got work to do. And I'm the first place that has to start.
Yeah. And as the executive team, your viewpoint on the business is probably very, very, very different than what your frontline or entry-level employees see, experience, and do in their day-to-day. So I think that requires, like you said, a bit of vulnerability and empathy. You go, wow, okay, you're right. There is some things where we can improve. Now, you wrote a book called Purpose Ignited, specifically on how to help leaders unleash their passion and elevate their cause. And what I want to talk about next is, why is it critical for senior executives to get clear on who they are and clarify any assumptions that they might have about what culture transformation actually is before they start doing the work? Why is that important?
Okay, Mary, you're just brilliant. I love the way you ask questions. Oh, so fun to be on the other side of the mic too with somebody that's so good at this. Okay, so the first thing is leadership, job number one really is knowing yourself. You have to know, one, how it is you're showing up in the room. Are people afraid of you? Do people think that you are not sure of what you're doing? How are you coming across? Are you coming across as a know-it-all, somebody who has all the answers, and there's only one way to do things, and it's the way you do things? You have to be able to know how people are receiving you, and also what you value. It's important to know. I do a lot with whenever I'm working with executives and leaders is help them understand to identify their strengths, their values, the way they prefer to communicate and behave. So important. Some people want to get straight and to the point, and others are like, I want to first, just connect with you on a human level. If you don't understand how you are behaving, you run the big risk of expecting everyone to behave and communicate in the same way that you do. And then you make them wrong when they don't. You get frustrated with their behavior. Then you have the tension. You don't know where it's coming from. So you have to start there. And the reason I wrote that particular book was I wanted one for people, for just as you said, I wanted the leaders to have a way to be able to get into their own worlds of what did they value, their identities, all those sorts of things, before they could start the process of being able to activate and open the hearts and connect their people to the organization and then enliven them by sparking their purpose. And then along the way, what that does, it helps the leader to become an inspirational leader. But you can't do any of that unless you're really clear about who you are, what you value, what you care about, what upsets you, what frustrates you. Yeah, that's exactly was so much about it was just really you gotta do the hard push-ups of this kind of self-knowledge work.
It's incredibly important. I mean, you and I talked offline about conscious versus unconscious beliefs, and so that's, I think, really important in the process of understanding what you believe is a leader in the first place, what you believe are your strengths and traits first. And then what is the reality? What are other people's perceptions of what a leader is or isn't, and your perceived strengths or not? I think, that requires, it just requires a level of emotional intelligence on the executive level to be able to receive the good, bad, and ugly and realize that it's continuous improvement, right? It's continuously working for the greater good, to improve what the employee experience is like, to improve what the customer experience is like, and make it a win-win-win for all.
Yeah. And there's so much that you said that's really important to tease out. But one thing I will add to what we're talking about is you might be listening to this and thinking to yourself, oh yeah, I know myself. I got that. I did that. I've done the work. Well, I have news for you. I don't care if you make it to age 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. You're going to spend all of your life learning about yourself because there's that much to know. I mean, I can tell you just this week alone, Mary, I had a major aha about myself that I did not understand until just this week when I had a conversation. I was on somebody else's podcast yesterday, and he helped me really understand, how I'm viewing things, how my mind works, how it is that I'm communicating that I didn't understand before. And it was gobsmacking. So one, it's an ongoing process, and you get so much value when you get different, perspectives from different people, whether they're, people on the front line. This is really important. Talk to your brand new people that come into the organization and ask them, what do you notice about this place? What do you notice about how it is that we do things, how we communicate? How would you describe that? Now you get a fresh mirror held up to yourself. So there's so much in having that curiosity about how are we showing up, and do I like what I'm hearing about how we're showing up?
Right. And I think that you're spot on. Curiosity is the key word here, because that's why you would want to do employee listening at all levels. Because what a frontline employee is going to tell you versus a retail employee versus a finance or a senior executive is going to be completely different. Right? And then once you've got the data in front of you, then you can figure out prioritization. What am I going to do in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 in order to start moving the counter towards a more positive workspace, a more cohesive one, and a more collaborative one as well, right? So I wonder, kind of thinking about this, because this is it, right? Cultural transformation, it's not ping pong tables and not pizza parties, like we said earlier. Then you can figure out what the how is. How am I going to actually move the levers? But talk to me about ways we can actually measure if culture change is sticking or not in real tangible ways.
Yeah, definitely you go back to, the conversation, surveying your team. Here's what we set out to do. That we had this initiative. This was our goal. How would you could simply ask on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate our effectiveness? Are we a rock star 10 at this? Are we doing pretty good at 7 or 8? Did we just miss the mark entirely at 1 or 2? So those kinds of little pulse surveys can make a big difference. As you mentioned before, the listening and the groups conversations are really important, because then you tease out more of the dynamics and the details of what's going on here. But the measuring, you can do it across departments. You can do it, simple things like qualitative sentiment analysis, things like that. So before, the first set of questions is more, quantitative, but that sentiment is really important. And I really, especially when you're working toward change, do we feel encouraged by what we're seeing? This is actually working. We're doing it. Or this is ridiculous. Why are we even embarking on this? It's never going to happen. Back to what you keep saying about beliefs. Man, beliefs power an organization. And to your earlier point, they're almost always unconscious.
Yeah. Our brain likes to run on autopilot. It's a less calorie intake and push out. So here's my hot take, Alise, and I'm going to say something a little bit spicy. And I really am curious if you are seeing this with your clients as well. For the last few years, many companies of all sizes, but especially in the mid to large size organizations, are going through many rounds of layoffs. They're getting lean on paper, get profitable for shareholders, and cutting left, right, and center, right? The problem with that is culture gets decimated along the way. Trust in your leadership. Am I going to be next? Psychological safety, all-time low. Belonging, what's that? And all of the things that are going to potentially lead you to losing your top talent, because right, frankly, why would they stay if they feel like they're on the chopping block next, right? There's no sense of company loyalty either way, if I'm honest. So here's my thoughts, especially as this relates to cultural transformation work, because then it is high stakes to get this right and to do it with intention and heart and purpose, right? Is we have to, as executives and executive advisors, we have to rethink how culture even works. It's no longer about, does the employee have company pride? Does the employee have company loyalty? I read a study recently that the current generation, millennials and Gen Z, spend 1.7 years at a job before they bounce, either because they've gotten laid off or they're just go to a better opportunity. Here's my hypothesis. I think that it requires the company leaders, executives, to really reframe everything, knowing that layoffs are a thing that's happening, and I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. How do I really put value and invest into my top talent that I have retained, so that while they're here, even if it's a short amount of time, they're getting what they need in leadership development, building their network, experience, et cetera, so that when they hop to the next lily pad, they're set up for success. If a company believes in that kind of mode, rather than, hey, you need to be wearing our company logo all times and selling all the time. Yes, that is an important part, but you believe that people are looking at their roles as postings, temporary, right? I'm going to invest in Alise while she's with our company. And I realize that this is a way to help create a better employee experience. And Alise, the employee, goes, you know what? I see that these guys are investing in me. They're building mentorship programs. They're doing programming that helps me build my professional experience. Who knows how long I'll be here, but I'm willing to commit. I'm going to produce better customer experience, better output. And guess what? There's a win for the customer, because when it's a better customer experience, guess what? You're going to spend more. You're going to stay longer as an employee or as a customer. Win. What's your thoughts on that?
I think you're spot on right. And I'm not the only one who thinks you're spot on right. I've had several people on my podcast that have talked about this very thing. And it speaks to the need to really recreate the contract between the employer and the employee, or the workforce, whatever role they might be. They might be fractional employees, contractors, or whatever. And I like very much the notion, and I can't tell you exactly, because it really is a conglomeration of voices where it came from, but I really like the idea of an organization situating themselves to their people, that for as long as you're with us, we promise to help you learn, grow, and become more. And we ask in return that you do everything that you can to help us serve to our mission. So we know that you may not be here for whatever period of time. Maybe it's 5 years, 10 years, maybe it's whatever next week. But let's make that promise to each other. And so what it does is that you disconnect and move away from this idea that we expect you to be loyal and stay here with us for 20 years. We just simply ask for whatever period of time that we are together, that we each promise the other we're going to do everything that we can to make the other one better.
Man,
I think that's really workable.
So powerful. And imagine if you got that message in the pre-boarding phase, right? You've accepted the offer, you haven't started your first day yet, and that's the message that comes across. I think that changes. It's a foundational understanding and expectation. It changes the experience from the jump for the better for everyone. Very powerful.
It does, and it does require, to your earlier point, that it does require an investment on the standpoint, or from the vantage point of the company. You do need to invest in the people that you have with you for whatever period of time they are with you, in order to fulfill that two-way promise.
For sure. So tell me, when working with your clients, what's one story or example of a leader who's doing it well, doing this kind of culture transformation work well?
I thought we might talk about that. So I did some research, and I found there's various companies out there doing that. And I thought, well, that's great. But what I would rather do is let me share one that I got to be with, and I got to watch the whole transition because I was a part of it. And it was a company here. They're a small sustainability consultancy for commercial real estate. And I had occasion to meet them because I was at an airport, and I gave one of their people a copy of my book. That's how the conversation started. But literally, it was so interesting, Mary. I came in on a Friday afternoon to talk with the founder and her two key main leaders about their culture issue and what they were up against. And over in the course of an hour and a half, I found out that they had been on the top list of places to work, a couple of years prior, and they were seen as like an authority in the industry, pioneer authority in their space, very high employee engagement up until recently. And then within a year, something like crazy just fell off. And the founder was like, I don't know what is going on here. I don't know. I have my long-standing clients are really complaining now and starting to threaten to leave because we're not able to give them the customer service that they want and need and have expected. I can't hire back. People are leaving. I can't hire backfills fast enough to replace the people that are leaving. The people that are here are so disgruntled and disengaged. Anyway, so it was like the set of problems was off the charts. And this is a very strong leader. This is a person who's very direct, very strong in her communication. And it was pretty funny. You'll laugh at this. We got to the bit about how I would go about helping her, and she said, "Can you start on Monday?" And I said, "No, but I could start Tuesday." And so what happened is, I would say what made that process go well was, one, she took this advice. There's an outside counsel, which is what we started the conversation with, an outside person who has some expertise in being able to lead these kinds of charges. When I found out and I surfaced all of the things that were going on, both that they appreciated, that they were disgruntled about, she listened, and so did the rest of the team. And she did a couple of times in the beginning, tried to defend, and we moved into the, that this generation doesn't want to work kind of thing. And I'm like, let's talk about how that doesn't actually work. So even when she had some built-in biases and wanted, to kind of go on her own speed, if you will, she was able to, when I pushed back on her, she was able to go, okay. So what made that successful in the long run was, one, she did everything that we asked her to do. We articulated the purpose that had gotten so lost. Their values had gotten so lost. We enrolled the whole team Now that at the time there were about 45 people in the organization, so we could enroll the whole team. They were all part of this, so there was no issue down from the top and everybody expecting to drink it up and eat it. So those are all things that she did really, really well with her team. And then I said, we have to be able to train your leaders to be more inspiring. Right now, they're very directive, and that's not what people want. That you're not going to get their best. So we did that training. She accepted that, did that. Then we started to lift the whole rest of the team because they needed to learn and grow too, and see how they were personally connected to the values and purpose. And we did that work. And within like 3 months, there was already a huge change. But then the important thing was, then she stepped out of the way. And she let her other two leaders, who had been otherwise quite quiet and deferred to her, take on more of the stewardship of making sure that this cultural change and the way they were living their purpose was sticking. So much of it was really, I would say, that made it work for her was that she just really took the advice and she just went with it, and she didn't push on it. Whenever I gave her feedback on, this is a little strong for them. There's a disconnect in how we're positioning this. She would take it. And now the end of that whole story was she did end up getting an offer to her company was purchased, and she had an exit strategy, and she's fully retired now. And some of that same culture is still in and now penetrating the acquiring company. So it was really a great example of, you need help. You sought outside counsel, you listened to it, and you did what they asked you to do, and you learned why you were being told to do what you were doing. It really was beautiful, Mary. I mean, I'm so still proud, and now she's a dear friend, of course.
I love it. I mean, I think about the wise words of Maya Angelou, right? When you know better, you have to do better. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of having that outside perspective of seeing what the truths actually are. What are people saying? What is the experience they're having so that you can do better? If you're curious about the work that Alise does out in the world, I highly, highly recommend you go over to our show notes, thesimplifiers.com. That's where you're going to find all the links to everything, all the resources that we talked about today. But you also can check out our website, gusto-now.com. You can inquire more about the books that she's written and the resources and training that's available out there. We'll also put a link to her LinkedIn as well, because I highly recommend just reach out to Alise and say, hey, I heard you on the Simplifiers podcast. I'd love to continue this conversation because let's face it, my company needs somebody like you and fast. So make sure you head over to thesimplifiers.com and find that in the show notes. Now, Alise, I have a few questions for you as we wrap up that I like to ask everyone that comes on the podcast. So here we go, rapid fire. First off, what's one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
Well, I have recently really fallen in love with this book called The New Science of Momentum, How the Best Coaches and Leaders Build a Fire from a Single Spark. It's by Don Yeager and Bernard Banks. And what I loved about it, Mary, and it smacks down to this conversation's lane as well, is it really speaks to how do you help your team to recognize when there is a spark, believe that we can do something with that spark, back on the belief bet, and be able to steward it and take it from a moment to momentum. I think it's so, so, so powerful. Really speaks to high performance and how to really get teams in motion. So I love that one.
Love it. We'll link it up in the show notes. Again, you can find that over at thesimplifiers.com. I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for today?
Oh, gosh, I'm so grateful for my team. I'm so grateful. I mean, honestly, Mary, there's no way we'd be doing what we're doing if we weren't in this together. And I didn't have the good fortune of attracting them to us and them wanting to stay. And their creativity and commitment just blows me away. I'm so grateful.
That means a lot. So tell me, who is one person who in your network, somebody you know personally, that just is up to brilliant things? If we were to shine a spotlight on them, who knows? Maybe one day I'll have them on the podcast. Who would you recommend?
Mm. That's a really tough question because of how many people that I encounter on a regular basis and just through my podcast alone. I think I'm going to call up one person that comes to mind. Her name is Wendy Lipton-Dibner. I had her on my podcast some time back. And what I want to celebrate about her is, one, she's brilliant. And two, she's doing something that I haven't seen anybody else do. I help organizations to measure and activate meaning and purpose. She's helping them to measure impact. So that means being able to measure the impact of their employees on, customers, on the company, et cetera, with the idea being that everybody wants to matter. And they want to know how they're mattering. To what extent does it matter? And she has a whole system to do that. She's got a patent on this. She's got technology around this. It's really impressive what she's doing.
Awesome. We will put link Wendy up in the show notes. And so if you guys are curious about her, you can find that over at the simplifiers.com. I am so grateful for our time today. Again, you guys go find Alise and her team over at gusto-now.com and inquire about their services and learn more about what they do. But Dr. Alise, my last question for you today is this. Someone somewhere is listening to you and I right now. Let's say they're a senior executive. They see the culture around their company is not good, and they know a change really needs to happen and fast. What's one thing you could whisper in their ear right now just to encourage them in this moment?
Oh, that's such a great question. One thing I would whisper in their ear is, if you have that kind of a niggling feeling, it's probably much worse than you think. Do something about it.
Do it now. Thanks again. Appreciate you.
Enjoyed you, Mary. Thanks so much for having me on.